The vote failed by a single margin. Ambassador Helen Price stood at the podium, her hands gripping the edges as the electronic tally flickered across every screen in the Galactic Assembly Hall. 47 civilizations voted to strip humanity of its council seat. 46 voted against. The Vrian delegation erupted in chittering celebration, while the crystalline Zephyrons hummed their approval. Helen's jaw tightened as she looked across the chamber at the faces, appendages and sensor arrays of species humanity had once called allies. "This body has made its decision," Supreme Arbiter Krell announced, his 6 eyes blinking in sequence. "Humanity is hereby removed from the Galactic Council for violations of the Preserved Worlds Doctrine. Your military forces will withdraw from all disputed territories within 30 standard cycles." Helen didn't move. Behind her, the other human delegates remained frozen in their seats. Captain Ryan Mitchell of the Earth Defense Fleet stood against the back wall, his dress uniform crisp despite the 7-hour session. His hand rested near his sidearm, a gesture that hadn't gone unnoticed by the Vryn security forces. "We followed your rules," Helen said quietly into the microphone. "We saved the Torvian colonies when the plague hit. We defended Zephyron mining stations from pirate raids. We died by the thousands protecting trade routes you refused to patrol." "You interfered with natural development cycles," Krell interrupted. "The Torvians were meant to evolve past their biological weaknesses. You stunted them with your medicine. They would have gone extinct. That was their path. The Assembly has spoken, Ambassador Price. Humanity's appeal is denied." Helen looked down at the datapad in her hands. The message had arrived 3 minutes ago, through quantum channels, marked with the highest priority seal. She'd been waiting for it since the moment the trial began 6 months earlier. The words glowed on the screen, short and absolute. She lifted her head and met Krell's gaze directly. Then humanity withdraws its membership from the Galactic Assembly, effective immediately. The chamber fell silent. Even the Vryn stopped their celebrating. Supreme Arbiter Krell's mouthparts clicked in confusion. "You cannot withdraw. The Charter does not permit voluntary departure." "Your Charter," Helen corrected. "Not ours. We signed the Galactic Concordat under specific terms. Article 19. Subsection 7 states that any member civilization stripped of council representation may terminate their agreement without penalty. You just gave us that right." She closed the datapad with a sharp click that echoed through the suddenly quiet hall. Captain Mitchell straightened, his hand moving away from his weapon to clasp behind his back. The other delegates rose from their seats in perfect unison. "Furthermore," Helen continued, her voice carrying across the massive chamber, "as of this moment, all human-maintained systems are now under sole Earth authority. That includes the defense platforms orbiting 42 assembly worlds, the trade lane navigation beacons we installed and maintain, the terraforming equipment on 17 colony projects, the medical stations that serve 200 planets." "You cannot hold galactic infrastructure hostage," Krell stammered. "We're not holding anything hostage. We built it. We maintained it. It's ours. You have 30 standard cycles to establish your own systems before we deactivate ours and bring them home." Helen stepped down from the podium. The other delegates fell in behind her, forming a column that marched toward the grand exit. Captain Mitchell moved to take point, his boots striking the polished floor with military precision. The assembled species watched in stunned silence as humanity walked out. Outside the assembly hall, the Earth delegation didn't stop. They moved through the diplomatic quarter with purpose, past embassy compounds where alien staffers watched through windows. Muse drones swarmed around them, broadcasting the exodus across thousands of worlds. Helen didn't look back. Part 2 began 12 hours after the walkout, when the true scope of human withdrawal became apparent across the galaxy. Station Commander Lisa Chen stood in the control room of Defense Platform Sentinel-9, watching the tactical display as freighters scrambled to reroute through slower, more dangerous paths. Without human navigation beacons, the safe corridors through asteroid fields and gravitational anomalies had effectively vanished. Third convoy this hour requesting emergency guidance, her communications officer reported. They're saying their own systems can't map the Helix passage. "Not our problem anymore," Lisa said, though her stomach twisted at the words. The Helix passage cut travel time between the core worlds by 6 days. Without human beacons marking the shifting gravitational pockets, ships would have to take the long route around the neutron star cluster. Those who tried the passage without guidance would be torn apart by forces they couldn't predict. Her second officer, Commander Jake Peterson, pulled up casualty projections. Intelligence estimates 12,000 ships rely on human infrastructure for safe passage. If they don't reroute, we're looking at significant losses. "Then they'll reroute," Lisa said firmly. "We gave them 30 days' notice." The assembly made their choice. Now they live with it. But even as she spoke, alerts began flooding the display. The Vryn were mobilizing their fleet. 8 battle groups had broken orbit from their homeworld, burning hard toward human positions. Lisa's hand hovered over the alert klaxon. "They're really going to try it," Jake muttered. "They think they can force us to turn the systems back on." Lisa activated the secure channel to Earth Command. Admiral Karen Foster's face appeared instantly, suggesting she'd been waiting for the call. "Station Commander, report. Vryan battle groups inbound to multiple human positions. ETA 4 hours to Sentinel-9, 6 hours to the medical platforms around Torvian space. They're splitting their forces." Admiral Foster's expression didn't change. "Defensive posture only. Do not fire unless fired upon. But Lisa, if they fire, you put them down hard. Make it loud. Make sure every sensor array in 3 systems records what happens when someone threatens human assets." "Understood, Admiral." The channel closed. Lisa turned to her crew, 37 men and women who'd served together for 2 years. "Battle stations. This is not a drill. Weapons free on my command only. Nobody fires early. Nobody hesitates when I give the word. We're about to teach the galaxy what human defensive platforms can actually do." The crew moved with practiced efficiency. Sentinel-9 had been designed as a defensive installation, but human engineers had learned long ago that the best defense involved overwhelming offensive capability. The platform's main railgun could punch through a capital ship's shields in a single shot. Its missile batteries carried warheads that burned hotter than most stars, and the point defense grid could track and eliminate 1,000 incoming threats simultaneously. The Vryn had clearly forgotten that humans had built these platforms to protect assembly worlds from outside threats. They'd never considered what would happen if those platforms turned against assembly forces. 4 hours later, the Vryn arrived. 8 massive warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, their weapons already charging. Lisa watched them close the distance, waiting for the moment they'd declare their intentions. The lead ship, a dreadnought-class vessel named the Searing Truth, opened a channel. "Human vessel, you will reactivate the navigation beacons immediately or face consequences." Lisa leaned back in her chair. "Searing Truth, this is Station Commander Chen. You are ordered to maintain a distance of 50,000 kilometers from this platform. Any closer, and we will consider it a hostile act. We do not recognize human authority in this sector. Stand down and comply." "Negative. You have 30 seconds to adjust your course." The Vryn ships accelerated, weapons hot, shields glowing with defensive energy. Lisa counted down, silently, giving them every chance to reconsider. At 5 seconds, she gave the order. "All batteries, fire!" Sentinel-9 lit up like a supernova. The main railgun spoke first, a rod of tungsten alloy accelerating to a fraction of light speed. It caught the Searing Truth directly in the forward shields, punching through and continuing into the ship's primary hull. The dreadnought's entire front section exploded outward, venting atmosphere and debris. The missile batteries followed, 300 warheads streaking toward the remaining 7 ships. The Vryn point defense systems tried to respond, but they'd been designed for conventional warfare. Human missiles were anything but conventional. They weaved through defensive fire, their targeting systems adapting in real time. 17 missiles got through, detonating against shields and armor. 2 Vryn cruisers died in the first 30 seconds. A third lost its engines and began tumbling through space. The remaining 4 ships broke formation, trying to retreat, But Lisa had anticipated that. The platform's secondary batteries, smaller railguns designed for anti-fighter operations, tracked the fleeing vessels and opened fire. One cruiser took 3 hits to its aft section and exploded. Another lost its FTL drive and went dark. The last 2 Vryn ships managed to jump away, their hulls scarred and smoking. The entire engagement had lasted 97 seconds. Lisa watched the debris field expand, feeling no satisfaction, only grim necessity. "Send full tactical data to all human stations," she ordered. "Let everyone see what happened here. And get me Admiral Foster again." The Admiral's face reappeared on screen, and behind her, Lisa could see the bustle of Earth Command's war room. "I'm watching the replay now," Foster said. 8 Vryn battle groups hit human positions across the sector. All of them got the same reception. The galaxy just watched us destroy 43 warships without losing a single platform. "What's the Assembly's response?" "Panic," Foster said with grim amusement. "Supreme Arbiter Krell is demanding an emergency session. The Vryn screaming about human aggression. The Zephrons are suddenly very quiet, and about a dozen species are sending private channels, asking if maybe we could reconsider the whole withdrawal thing." Lisa felt a cold satisfaction settle in her chest. "And our answer? The same as it was 12 hours ago. We gave them 30 days. The countdown continues. They wanted us out of the Assembly. Now they get to learn what that actually means." Across the galaxy, the pattern repeated. Human medical stations locked their doors to alien patients. Terraforming equipment shut down mid-cycle, leaving colony projects half complete. Trade lane beacons went dark, and every species that had voted to remove humanity from the Council began to understand the scope of their mistake. Humans hadn't just been members of the Galactic Assembly, they'd been the infrastructure that held it together. Now that infrastructure was leaving, and the galaxy was starting to fall apart. The Galactic Assembly convened in emergency session 18 hours after the human exodus. Supreme Arbiter Krell stood at the central podium, his 6 eyes scanning the chamber as representatives from 47 species. The atmosphere had shifted dramatically from the previous day's triumphant vote. Now fear and uncertainty rippled through the assembled delegations. Ambassador Helen Price watched from the observation gallery, no longer entitled to a seat on the main floor. Captain Mitchell stood beside her, along with a security detail of 4 Marines in full combat armor. The Assembly had protested their presence, but Helen had been clear. If they wanted humans present for this session, they would accept human security protocols. The Assembly had relented. "The matter before this body," Krell began, his voice lacking its usual authority, "concerns the recent hostilities initiated by Vryn military forces against human installations. The Vryn delegation has filed a formal complaint alleging unprovoked human aggression, resulting in the destruction of 43 warships and the deaths of over 6,000 Vryn personnel." Senator Vrix of the Vryn delegation rose, his scales darkening with rage. "The humans massacred our people. They lured us into a trap with their withdrawal, then slaughtered our forces when we attempted to negotiate the return of critical infrastructure." Helen activated her communication device without requesting permission to speak. Her voice cut through the chamber. "For the record, every human platform broadcast clear warning messages before firing. Your ships ignored those warnings and continued aggressive approaches with weapons charged. The tactical data has been shared with every member species. We defended our property after giving fair notice, nothing more." Krell's mandibles clicked in irritation. "Ambassador Price, you no longer hold speaking privileges in this chamber." "Then stop talking about us like we're not here. You want to discuss human actions. We'll be part of that discussion. Otherwise, we leave, and you can figure out your infrastructure problems on your own." The threat landed like a physical blow. Krell's eyes blinked in rapid sequence, a sign of stress among his species. Around the chamber, representatives shifted uncomfortably. The past 18 hours had driven home exactly how dependent the Assembly had become on human systems. "Perhaps," interjected Ambassador Nellis of the Torvians, a species whose entire civilization owed its survival to human intervention during the Plague Years, We should focus on finding a solution rather than assigning blame. The reality is that galactic commerce has effectively halted. Ships are trapped in transit. Colony projects are failing. Our medical infrastructure is collapsing. We need the humans. They're holding us hostage, Vrix hissed. No, Nellis corrected, his voice firm. We expelled them from the assembly. They responded by taking their property and leaving, exactly as the Charter permits. We created this situation. Senator Kalara of the Zephrons, one of the species that had voted most enthusiastically for human expulsion, rose on her crystalline limbs. Her voice chimed like broken glass. The Zephron Concordance formally requests that humanity reconsider its withdrawal. We acknowledge that our vote was premature and not fully informed regarding the consequences. That's a pretty way of saying you didn't realize how much you needed us, Helen called out. But here's the problem. This isn't about need. This is about respect. You stripped our council seat based on charges that were politically motivated. You ignored decades of human sacrifice defending this assembly. You declared that saving lives was a violation of your precious doctrine. Now you want us back because things are inconvenient. What would you have us do? Krell demanded. Grovel? Beg? We are the Galactic Assembly, the representatives of civilizations that span 10,000 worlds. Helen stood and Captain Mitchell moved with her. The Marines fell in behind them as they descended from the observation gallery. The assembly guards tensed, but none moved to stop them as Helen walked onto the main floor, her boots echoing in the silent chamber. Here's what happens next, she said, her voice carrying to every corner. The 30-day countdown continues. At the end of that period, every piece of human technology gets deactivated or brought home. That includes the defensive platforms that have protected your worlds for the past 20 years. The Kryl Raiders are going to love that. I hear they've been waiting for a chance at the Zephron crystal mines. Kalara's surface rippled with distress. The Kryl Raiders were a savage species that had been kept at bay only by the defensive perimeter humanity had established. Without those platforms, dozens of worlds would be vulnerable. But, Helen continued, if this assembly wants to negotiate for continued access to human systems, we're willing to discuss terms, not as supplicants, not as subordinates, as equals with full council representation restored and immunity from any future politically motivated expulsions. That would require a charter amendment, Krell protested, a unanimous vote of all member species. Then you'd better start convincing people. You have 29 days and 6 hours. Helen turned and walked back toward the exit. Behind her, the assembly erupted in debate. Species that had voted for human expulsion now faced the wrath of those who would suffer most from the withdrawal. The Torvians demanded an immediate reversal. The border worlds, who relied on human defense platforms, threatened to withdraw themselves if humanity wasn't reinstated. The carefully constructed political coalition that had removed humans from power was fracturing. Captain Mitchell kept pace with Helen as they left the chamber. "Think they'll manage it?" he asked quietly. "Doesn't matter," Helen replied. "We're not the ones who need them. They need us, and it's about time the galaxy learned that lesson." Outside the assembly hall, the human delegation boarded their transport shuttle. As they lifted off, Helen watched the diplomatic quarter fall away beneath them. Protests had erupted across multiple embassy compounds. The Vryn were calling for war. The Zephrons were organizing emergency economic councils, and the smaller species, the ones who had abstained from the vote, were desperately trying to arrange private meetings with human representatives. The shuttle climbed through the station's atmosphere dome and into open space. Ahead, the Earth diplomatic carrier Valiant waited in high orbit, its weapon systems active and shields raised. 6 destroyer escorts surrounded it in a defensive formation that left no doubt about human readiness for further conflict. Admiral Karen Foster was waiting when Helen reached the carrier. "The Joint Chiefs want a full briefing in 2 hours, she said. "But first you should see this." Intelligence just intercepted a transmission from the Kryl Raider command structure. They've noticed the situation developing. They're mobilizing their fleets. They'll hit the border worlds the moment our platforms go dark. Helen felt a chill despite her earlier bravado. The krill were unlike the civilized species of the assembly. They didn't negotiate, didn't trade, didn't build. They raided and destroyed and moved on. Humanity had held them back for 2 decades through superior firepower and strategic positioning. Without human defenses, the border regions would be devastated. Estimated casualties? Helen asked. Conservative projections put it at 50 million dead in the first month. Twice that, if the krill pushed deep into assembly space. Helen closed her eyes briefly. This was the nightmare scenario, the reason she'd hoped the assembly would see reason before things reached this point. But politics had trumped survival, and now innocence would pay the price. "We can't let that happen," she said quietly. "So we stay and defend them?" Foster asked. "After everything they've done?" "We defend the innocent. We always have. That's what makes us different from the Kryl and from the politicians who threw us out. Get me a secure channel to Earth Command. I need to speak with the President." Back on the assembly station, Supreme Arbiter Krell sat alone in his private chambers, staring at the intelligence reports spread across his desk. The Krall were coming. The infrastructure was failing. And humanity held all the cards. He'd spent 40 years building the coalition that removed the humans from power, believing that their influence had grown too strong, that they were changing the fundamental nature of the assembly. Now he wondered if he'd destroyed the only thing keeping the galaxy safe. His communication console chimed, an incoming message flagged as urgent and classified. Krell opened it and felt his blood run cold. It was from Senator Vrix of the Vryn, and it outlined a plan to seize human technology by force, not through open warfare, but through covert operations, sabotage, and assassination. The message claimed support from 12 other species. Krell deleted the message immediately. Whatever his mistakes, whatever his political calculations, he would not be party to such actions. He opened a new channel, one he'd never thought he'd use. He called Ambassador Helen Price directly. The next 72 hours became a frantic race against time and politics. Helen stood in the Valiant's war room, surrounded by holographic displays showing the galaxy in crisis. Admiral Foster coordinated fleet movements. Captain Mitchell liaised with human military commanders across hundreds of systems, and on every screen the countdown continued. 26 days until complete withdrawal. "The Kral fleets are 2 weeks out from the border worlds," Foster reported. "They're not even trying to hide their approach. They know the assembly is in chaos." Helen studied the tactical display, 5 Krill invasion fleets, each numbering over 200 ships. They'd strike simultaneously at different points along the border, overwhelming whatever defenses the assembly could scramble together. Without human platforms, the slaughter would be inevitable. "Status of assembly negotiations?" she asked. "Stalled. The Vryn bloc is refusing to support charter amendments. They'd rather let the border worlds burn than give us back our council seat. They're betting we'll intervene anyway, that we're too ethical to let millions die." "They're right about one thing," Helen admitted. "We can't watch that happen. But they're wrong if they think we'll do it for free." She pulled up a new display, showing the disposition of human forces. Every defensive platform was at full alert. Every Earth fleet vessel was armed and ready. And in secret shipyards throughout human space, the next generation of warships was accelerating toward completion. The assembly thought humanity's military strength lay in defensive installations. They were about to learn otherwise. "Send a message to all border worlds," Helen ordered. "Make it public, broadcast on all frequencies. Tell them that humanity will maintain defensive coverage of their systems regardless of the Assembly's political decisions. But make it clear we're doing this for them, for the innocent civilians who had no say in our expulsion, not for the Assembly itself." Mitchell looked up from his station. "That's going to undercut your negotiating position. If they know we'll defend them anyway, they have no incentive to meet our terms. Then we sweeten the deal from the other direction. Admiral, I need you to pull 3 battle groups back from the border. Make it visible. Let the Assembly see us repositioning forces away from the Krill approach vectors." Foster's eyes widened. "That's a bluff. We're not actually going to leave them exposed." "No, but they don't know that. We've got stealth carriers that can cover the same space without being detected. Let the Assembly think we're serious about letting the Krill through. Maybe that'll shake loose some votes. Over the next week, the pressure mounted. Helen's public promise to protect civilians won humanity enormous goodwill among the common people of the Assembly species. Protests erupted on dozens of worlds, demanding that their governments restore Human Council membership. But the political leadership remained divided, with the Vryn and their allies blocking every amendment attempt. Then the Krill accelerated their timeline. Intelligence reported they would reach the border in 10 days, not 14. The Assembly scrambled their own fleets to respond, but everyone knew the truth. Without human coordination and firepower, the defense would fail. On day 23 of the countdown, Supreme Arbiter Krell requested a private meeting with Helen Price. They met on neutral ground, a small research station operated by the Torvians. Helen brought Mitchell and 4 Marines. Krell came alone. "I received a message," Krell began without preamble, "from Senator Vrix and others. They plan to seize your technology through covert operations. Sabotage. Assassination. I wanted you to know." Helen studied the Arbiter carefully. "Why tell me this? You spent years building the coalition that expelled us." "Because I was wrong." The words seemed to pain him. "I thought humanity had too much influence. I worried you would remake the Assembly in your image. But I see now that your influence was the only thing holding back the chaos. The Vryn aren't interested in balance. They want dominance, and they'll burn the galaxy to get it. So what are you proposing? I will use my authority as Supreme Arbiter to call an emergency vote on charter amendments. I can fast-track the process, bring it to the floor in 3 days. I will argue publicly for restoration of human membership with the protections you've demanded, but I need something from you in return. Name it. Don't let the Krill through. Don't play politics with civilian lives. Whatever happens with the vote, promise me you'll defend the border worlds." Helen was quiet for a long moment. She thought about the 50 million estimated casualties, about the children who would die if she used them as leverage. She thought about the principles that had guided humanity's involvement in the Assembly from the beginning. "We were never going to let them die," she said finally. "The fleet repositioning was a bluff. We have stealth carriers covering every approach vector. The Krill won't get through." Krell's eyes blinked in rapid sequence, relief and shame mixing in his expression. "You've been protecting us even while we threaten you, even while we destroy your negotiating position. That's what humans do. It's why you needed us on the Council in the first place. Now let's see if you can convince the others of that." 3 days later, the Galactic Assembly met in a session that would determine the future of their civilization. Krell stood at the podium, his 6 eyes scanning the chamber as he prepared to speak. Helen watched from the observation gallery, no longer hoping for redemption but simply bearing witness to whatever came next. "Members of the Assembly," Krell began, "we stand at a crossroads. In 7 days the Krill will reach our borders. Without human defenses, 50 million beings will die. That is the conservative estimate. The reality could be far worse. We have a choice to make, and we must make it now." He activated a display showing the tactical situation, the Krill fleets advancing like a crimson tide toward vulnerable worlds. The humans have not abandoned us despite every reason to do so. Their platforms remain active. Their fleets guard our borders. They have protected us even as we expelled them from this body. Now I ask you, what does that say about their character? What does it say about ours? Senator Vrix rose, but Krell cut him off. The Vryn senator will have his turn to speak, but first, this body will hear the truth. 20 years ago, the Krill nearly overran this assembly. It was human intervention that stopped them. 15 years ago, the Zephron colonies faced extinction from plague. Human medicine saved them. 10 years ago, when the trade lanes collapsed, human engineers rebuilt them. Time and again, humanity has bled for this assembly. And we repaid them with expulsion based on charges brought by species who envied their success. The chamber erupted in shouts and protests, but Krell pressed on. I was part of that coalition. I voted for their expulsion. I was wrong. This body was wrong. And if we do not correct this error, we will deserve whatever fate befalls us. He turned to face the observation gallery, meeting Helen's eyes directly. "Ambassador Price, humanity has already demonstrated that you don't need this assembly. You've proven you can stand alone, that your systems function independently of our approval. But we need you, not because of your technology, though that is invaluable. We need you because you represent something this assembly has lost: the willingness to sacrifice for others, the courage to stand against threats, regardless of political cost, the moral clarity to know that some things matter more than power." Krell turned back to the assembled delegates. "I call for an immediate vote on the Charter Amendments restoring Human Council membership with full protections against future expulsion. This vote requires unanimous consent. I urge each of you to consider carefully what your vote means, not just for humanity, but for the future of everything we claim to represent." The debate lasted 6 hours. Species after species rose to speak, some supporting the amendments, others opposing them. The Vryn faction fought desperately to maintain their coalition, but the cracks were showing. Border worlds threatened mass withdrawal. The Torvians announced they would leave the assembly if humanity wasn't restored. The Zephrons, calculating the economic cost of human absence, switched their vote. Finally, as the countdown entered its final week, the vote was called. Helen held her breath as the tally appeared on every screen. One by one, the votes registered. Green for support, red for opposition. The chamber fell silent as the numbers climbed. 46 green votes, 46. One abstention remained. The Vryn delegation. Senator Vrick stood slowly, his scales pale with fury. He understood the political calculation. If he voted no, if he blocked the amendment, the border worlds would withdraw, the assembly would fracture, and the Vryn would be isolated. But if he voted yes, he admitted defeat, acknowledged human superiority. "The Vryn Confederation," he said through clenched teeth, "votes yes." The chamber erupted in celebration and relief. Helen closed her eyes, feeling the tension drain from her body. It was done. Humanity was back, not as supplicants, but as equals who had proven their worth beyond any doubt. But the real test was still coming. The Krill were only 4 days away. The battle for the border began at 0600 hours Galactic Standard Time, exactly 4 days after the Assembly vote. Commander Lisa Chen stood in the control room of Sentinel-9, watching as 5 massive Krill invasion fleets dropped out of faster-than-light travel across the border region. 200 ships per fleet, 1,000 vessels total, all burning towards civilian worlds with obvious hostile intent. "This is it," she said quietly. "Flag all human platforms. Weapons free. Engage on my mark." Across the border, 53 defensive platforms came alive. Their targeting systems locked onto the Krill formations with mechanical precision. The aliens had expected to find the border undefended or weakly protected by hastily assembled assembly forces. Instead, they flew straight into the most sophisticated defensive network in the galaxy. Lisa watched the Krill fleets close the distance, waiting for the optimal engagement range. The platform's main railguns had extreme reach, but she wanted maximum impact, wanted the first strike to devastate their formations. At 50,000 kilometers, she gave the order. All platforms. Fire! The space around the border worlds lit up with violence. 53 railguns spoke simultaneously, accelerating tungsten rods to relativistic speeds. The projectiles crossed the distance in seconds, punching into the Krill formations like hammers of God. Capital ships exploded, cruisers tumbled away with hulls split open. Fighters scattered in panic. But the Krill were not the Vryn. They were experienced warriors who had raided civilized space for centuries. The surviving ships adjusted their formations and accelerated, their own weapons charging. They'd taken brutal casualties, but nearly 800 ships remained, more than enough to overwhelm defensive platforms that were designed to be immobile fortifications. Then the Earth fleet arrived. They emerged from stealth at point-blank range, 12 carrier groups that had been holding position in perfect silence. Admiral Karen Foster commanded from the supercarrier Enterprise, a vessel so advanced that most assembly species didn't believe humans possessed such technology. Around her, Battleships and destroyers materialized like vengeful ghosts, their weapons already firing. The Krill had never faced human warships in open battle. They'd raided colonies protected by local forces, fought skirmishes with assembly patrols, but never confronted Earth's actual military strength. That ignorance cost them dearly. Enterprise's fighter wings launched first, 300 aerospace superiority craft that moved with inhuman precision. They were piloted by artificial intelligence augmented with human oversight, faster and more accurate than any organic pilot. The fighters tore into the Krill formations, their weapon systems targeting command ships and capital vessels with brutal efficiency. The battleships followed, their main batteries designed to crack planetary fortifications. Against Krill cruisers, the effect was devastating. One battleship, the Constitution, destroyed 17 enemy vessels in the first 5 minutes of combat. Its captain, Commander Andrew Peterson, coordinated his weapons batteries with cold precision, prioritizing threats and eliminating them with minimal wasted ordnance. The Krill tried to adapt. They were savage, but not stupid. Their remaining command ships attempted to reorganize, to concentrate their forces and punch through the defensive line at specific points. Admiral Foster anticipated every move. Her tactical computers had analyzed decades of Krill combat doctrine. She knew how they fought, how they thought, how they would respond to pressure. She didn't give them a chance to execute their strategies. The Earth fleet moved with practice coordination, destroyer squadrons breaking off to flank the Krill formations, while battleships maintained frontal pressure. The defensive platforms continued their relentless bombardment, their railguns never stopping. And through it all, Foster's voice remained calm on the command channel, directing her forces like a conductor leading an orchestra. Battle Group 7 press their left flank. Group 3 hold position and maintain fire discipline. Carrier Yorktown, launch your second wave. Target their command ships. I want their leadership decapitated. The battle raged for 2 hours. The Krill fought desperately, but they were outmatched in every category. Human weapons had longer range and greater accuracy. Human ships were faster and more maneuverable. Human coordination was flawless, while Krill communications degraded under electronic warfare assault. When it ended, 743 Krill vessels had been destroyed. The remaining 257 fled back into the dark regions beyond civilized space, their invasion crushed before it truly began. The Earth fleet had lost 4 destroyers and taken moderate damage to several other vessels. Not a single defensive platform had been destroyed. Lisa Chen watched the retreating Krill on her display, feeling a grim satisfaction. Send damage reports to command. Begin search and rescue for any surviving crews from our lost ships. And somebody get me a casualty count. The final tally came in an hour later. 1,700 human personnel killed, mostly from the destroyed destroyers. 0 civilian casualties. 0 assembly fleet casualties because the assembly fleet had remained well back from the fighting, watching humans defend their worlds. Admiral Foster addressed the assembly from the bridge of Enterprise, her transmission broadcast across the galaxy. Behind her, the bridge crew worked at their stations, professional and composed, despite having just fought the largest single battle of the war. Members of the Galactic Assembly, she began. The Krill invasion has been repelled. Your border worlds are secure. The threat has been eliminated for the foreseeable future. Earth Fleet stands ready to continue defending civilized space as we have for the past 2 decades. We ask nothing in return except the respect and partnership that was restored to us by your recent vote. She paused, letting that sink in. But let this serve as a lesson. Humanity does not make threats lightly. When we commit to defending something, we do so with our full strength. When we promise to withdraw, we mean it. When we walk away, we take our capabilities with us. The galaxy has seen what happens when humans are pushed out. I recommend you remember that in the future. The transmission ended. On worlds throughout the assembly, beings of dozens of species watched the battle recordings, saw the precision and power of human military force, and understood for the first time what they'd almost lost. The political landscape had shifted permanently. In the days following the battle, humanity's position in the Galactic Assembly was transformed from controversial to unassailable. The species that had voted for expulsion issued formal apologies. The border worlds erected monuments to the human defenders who had died protecting them. And deep in the halls of power, political leaders recalculated their positions, understanding that humanity was not just another member species to be manipulated through votes and procedure. Ambassador Helen Price returned to the Assembly Hall 4 weeks after walking out, this time to her restored seat on the Council. She carried with her a datapad containing new proposals for military coordination, infrastructure development, and joint scientific research. But more importantly, she carried the weight of humanity's proven commitment to protecting the innocent regardless of political cost. Supreme Arbiter Krell met her at the entrance to the Council chambers. "Ambassador Price," he said formally, "welcome back. Your seat has been prepared." Helen looked at him steadily. "I appreciate the sentiment, Arbiter, but I need you to understand something. Humanity isn't back because you need us, though you clearly do. We're back because walking away would have meant abandoning the principles that define us. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. We stand against threats that others fear to face. We build instead of tearing down. That's who we are. That's why we deserve our seat." "I understand that now," Krell replied. "I believe most of the Assembly does as well. The question is whether we can learn to work together as true partners rather than as competitors." "That depends on whether you're willing to accept that partnership means equality. No more political games. No more coordinated efforts to limit human influence. We contribute to this Assembly in ways no other species can match. It's time that was acknowledged and respected." Krell nodded slowly. "The border worlds are preparing a formal resolution nominating humanity for permanent Security Council status. Given recent events, I expect it will pass with overwhelming support. That would give you veto power over any future attempts at expulsion." Helen smiled slightly. Then perhaps this whole crisis was worth it. Sometimes you need to walk away to make people understand your value. She entered the council chambers, taking her seat among the representatives of 47 civilizations. The session began with a moment of silence for the human personnel killed defending the border. Then the Assembly moved on to the business of governing a galaxy, but now with a clearer understanding of who could be trusted when things became difficult. Captain Mitchell stood against the back wall of the chamber, watching the proceedings with satisfaction. The Marines had been rotated out, no longer needed now that humanity's position was secure. But he remained a reminder of the strength that backed Helen's diplomatic efforts. As the session progressed and various species presented their proposals and concerns, a pattern emerged. Again and again, representatives deferred to human expertise on matters of security, infrastructure, and crisis management. The galaxy had learned its lesson, though the cost had been high. Outside the Assembly Hall, the work of rebuilding continued. Human engineers reactivated navigation beacons throughout the trade lanes. Medical stations reopened to alien patients. Terraforming projects resumed under human supervision. The galaxy's infrastructure, so nearly lost, was preserved and strengthened, but everyone understood that things had changed. Humanity had demonstrated it could stand alone, that the Assembly needed it far more than it needed the Assembly. That knowledge would shape galactic politics for generations to come. The days of taking human contributions for granted were over. The era of humanity as a true power in the galaxy, respected and feared in equal measure, had begun. And in the dark regions beyond civilized space, the Kryll licked their wounds and planned their revenge, not understanding that they had awakened something far more dangerous than they could comprehend. The humans who had crushed their invasion were not warriors by nature. They were builders and healers who had learned to fight because the galaxy gave them no choice. The Kryll would return one day, and when they did, they would learn what happened when you threatened what humanity had sworn to protect. But that was a battle for another day. For now, the galaxy was at peace, held together by the very species it had tried to expel. The irony was not lost on anyone. As humans marched out of the Assembly, the galaxy had looked on in horror. As they marched back in, victorious and vindicated, that horror had transformed into something else entirely. Respect, gratitude, and the quiet certainty that humanity's place in the galactic order was no longer negotiable. The age of human dominance had not come through conquest or intimidation. It had come through sacrifice, through the willingness to stand alone for principles when everyone else had abandoned them. That was the true power of humanity, and it was a power that would reshape the galaxy for centuries to come.